So we being Texas. Texas is number 2 in the nation. After the last legislative session, University of Texas was asked to do a research project with different agencies throughout the state. And they estimate through their data collection and then looking at similar populations throughout the state that we have over 79 kids right now trapped in sex trafficking in the state of Texas. So when we think of the 87 kids that were identified here in Bell County by Juvenile Justice and Scott and White Hospital, 87 sounds like a shocking number, and it is. So we have that many kids identified from 2015 to 2017. But if we think about 79,000 kids in the state of Texas presently in human trafficking, we have a lot more work to be done to identify those kids and help them be set free, and also train the kids on how to avoid this, not really a new version of stranger danger, but help us to clarify what those dangers are, how to recognize those dangers, and have our parents recognize those dangers so that we can help protect them from that. Senator Cornyn has been working on a lot of different legislation to increase the penalties for traffickers and then also to decrease the penalties for victims. And so he's been very instrumental in this process. And he does point out that while we thought that modern day slavery was taken care of with Emancipation Proclamation and with the transatlantic slave trade being abolished, however, now we have more slavery in the United States. We, in fact, have 2 times more slavery going on in the world than during the transatlantic slave trade. Okay, so our vulnerable populations, and I'm gonna zoom through this because I think some of our resource people, they're going to share some other information with you. But our vulnerable populations, now, I do want to point out that, let's do a show of hands. Who in this room thinks that you are not vulnerable to human trafficking? Raise your hand if you think you are not vulnerable to human trafficking. Okay, you're thinking, okay, she's got something up her sleeve. Do I raise my hand or not? Well, if you think about it, the methods that traffickers use to lure in kids these days are they pretend to fill any need that child may have. So if we think about it, we can probably all think of something that we want or perceive that we need. That someone, if they knew what we wanted or they knew what we needed, they could step in and try to exploit us if we didn't have a support system or previous experience to be able to judge it. Does that make sense? Okay, so we think about all these vulnerable populations: kids in the juvenile justice system, kids with special needs or disabilities, kids in foster care, runaway and homeless youth, kids with a prior abuse in their background or abusive households, and then lacking a strong support system. All of these different wants, needs, do you see how those populations have a lot of wants and needs and a lack of ability, a lack of experience to be able to think through when someone might be trying to fool them? Okay, so, no, that's good. I'll go into more detail individually with you later if you want to talk about one of those. And really, the vulnerable populations could be a training in itself, and the red flags could be a training in itself. So this is just a brief overview. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, from now on I'm going to call it NCMEC because it's a lot shorter. So the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, aka NCMEC, they're the ones that produce the missing child posters that we see posted in Walmart and different places. Okay, so NCMEC counted in 2016 18,500 runaways. Out of that 18,500, 1 out of 6 of those, so for those of you who want to know exactly what percentage that is, that's 16.7, actually 16.66666%, 16.7% of that 18,500 were likely sex trafficking victims. Likely means they had all the indicators, but either they refused to get an exam at the hospital, or they refused to identify their trafficker, so there was no way for them to pursue a case. So out of that 1 in 6 that were likely victims, 86% of those ran away from a foster care placement when they ran away. So just to clarify that a little bit, because it's a little hard to grasp. Out of that 1 in 6, 86% of those kids ran away from a foster care placement before they were picked up by a trafficker. Okay, so runaways are highly vulnerable. Runaways who are in foster care are doubly vulnerable. So whenever you have multiple indicators, multiple vulnerabilities, that just increases the ways that a trafficker can lure someone in. Okay, so we've talked about some of these myths already. We talked about that individuals, it doesn't require transportation. Some of the kids are trafficked out of their own homes. Is trafficking the same as smuggling?
No.
Okay, I hear no's. Do we have any yeses? Okay, no's. Why no? Why is trafficking not the same as smuggling?
Smuggling is a crime against the border. Trafficking is a crime against the person.
Okay, she said trafficking is, I'm sorry, I'm clipping the order. Trafficking is a crime against the person. Smuggling is a crime against a border. So, and often, just to expand on that a little bit, we've heard in the media those semi-trucks filled with people that came across the border and they tragically died in the heat. The media called that trafficking. Was that trafficking?
Yes.
We don't know if there was an intention to sell those individuals, but we do know they were brought across a border. So it was definitely smuggling, but whether there's intent to sell is questionable. They were probably en route to, I think they were en route to Ohio is what the manifest said or something like that. But most of the time smuggling is done willingly to begin with, but then they may incur a bond debt that they have trouble paying off, and then they're put into trafficking in order to pay that person back. And it could be the plan to begin with, but we just want to make sure you understand the difference. Is trafficking always foreign nationals? No. How many of you thought that it was foreign nationals at some point in when you first started hearing of human trafficking? Did you picture that it was mainly international? Was anyone in that boat? That's how I was when I first heard of it. Must there be any signs of physical restraint, like ropes or burns or scarring or physical force in order for it to be classified as trafficking?
Yes.
How would a person be held if they're not tied up?
Mentally and financially.
Okay, threats, emotional, I heard mental captivity, very good.
Financial.
Trauma bonding. Financial, good, excellent. We have a very intelligent crowd. Drugs, definitely. Okay, so some of these are pretty shocking, so I don't want to go too quickly over them, but I do need to let the other speakers have their time. And you can ask me about these after. Let's keep going. Red flags, things to look for, especially tattoos, multiple stages of bruising. Tattoos on youth. First of all, there should be a conversation because it's not legal for youth to get tattoos. Second of all, if there are crowns or the name daddy or anything like a crown shows that someone has dominance over them. It shows ownership. These are used as brands or branding on those who are victims of trafficking. Some even use barcodes,
Dollar signs.
and others might have tattoos in the lips. So these are, I have lists of these on the resources, and I'm going to pass it on to the other speakers at this point. But so we just want to make sure that you research it, learn how to recognize it. And what number do you call if you notice something or you suspect something?
888-737-8888.
Good job. 888-3737-888. And out of respect for our law enforcement, it's great to give them a heads up because within 24 hours, they get a call from the national hotline passing the case to them. So thank you so much for your time, and I would love to talk with you all more later. I will pass the mic.
Our next speaker was Janet, with Natalie's mom, but right now the news is interviewing her, so she can't speak. We also had two other people on the program, and they have family issues, so we're gonna pray for them that their family is okay, but we're gonna continue rolling. Shannon, she works for a youth drop-off center. So how many people know we have a youth drop-in center? So a lot don't know. You know, when we talk about child sex trafficking,